So, welcome to Minds in Motion with Dr. K, where we dig into the stories and insights of high performing leaders and entrepreneurs who are changing the world. Join us as we explore their journey, their missteps, their successes, and wisdom they have gained along the way. I am your host, Dr. K, and today we've been joined by the esteemed none other than Dr. Kathy Senko, OBE. She's an executive director for nursing at King Faisal Specialist Hospital in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. She comes with over 32 years of international healthcare experience that has been gained both in public and private sector, in healthcare, clinical, operational, and strategic roles across the healthcare sector. Wow, so impressive. Dr. Senko has gained a BS in nursing from King's College London, a master's degree from University of Southampton, UK, and a doctorate from Middlesex University, UK. Dr. Senko is a well-respected thought leader, a researcher, and a conference speaker on leadership, coaching, and mentoring. Please help me welcome none other than Dr. Kathy Senko. Welcome to Minds in Motion, Dr. Senko.
Thank you very much. I am honored and delighted.
I am so excited to have you. So we are doing a series on females leading fearlessly in this disruptive era. And I know you are a fearless leader. So my first question for you today, Dr. Senko, is how do you define resilience in the context of your career? And what strategies have you used to cultivate it?
That's a wonderful question. When I think about what resilience is in the context of my own career, it has been an ability to withstand. Time is something that's characterized by change. I've been, as you said, in healthcare 33 years this year, actually. And there are so many things that happen in a 33-year window. In fact, there are so many things that happen in the space of a year. You think about the fact that when your career is not just your job, it's who you are, because we all bring a lot of ourselves into work. And so much happens in our lives and in our work. And it's an ability to withstand. And that ability to withstand is very much grounded in confidence that I know my stuff. It is grounded in experience, the fact that I likely have been through some of those situations before or worse, and therefore I know that I will come through it. It is grounded in faith. It is knowing that everything has a season. And sometimes it might be a long season or a short season, but the thing about seasons is that eventually they end. And therefore, you know that you will come out the other side. And there's also something in that faith that is about, when I think about Jeremiah 29, I know the plans I have for you, that there is nothing that happens in my life that is by accident. And there is nothing in my life that is wasted. And therefore, it is worth sticking through. And I think my resilience and my ability to withstand is also grounded in curiosity. I want to see what happens. I want to go through the process. I want to discover. There is some learning that comes out of that experience that makes me know that should this situation recur, I would know how to deal with it. And so I very simply think of resilience as an ability to withstand. It's not to dull yourself to the emotion of a moment. For example, if something is painful, it's important to acknowledge that it's painful and deal with it. If it's joyous, it's important to celebrate that joy. So it's not about being emotionless. It's really about a deep understanding that resilience is made up of a whole series of factors: faith, experience, curiosity, the ability to learn, all of those things, and also just this inner strength that comes from being in the same field for 30 plus years. That, if I can think of what the anatomy of withstanding is and what resilience is, that's what I would say.
Wow. 30 plus years is such a long tenure. Can you share a bit about that journey and becoming this leader in your industry? What does that look like for you? Because I know there was like, several ups, downs, maybe, what was that like for leading for 32 years to get you to where you are today?
If I could characterize my journey in healthcare, it's been about, I've always been really curious, and I didn't realize that I was curious until much later in my career. I've been very bold and very curious, but I think more curious than bold. And the curiosity has always come from what else could I do? I think um, I've, I would characterize myself as having a servant heart. I'm always in it to see what I can do to help the people I work with, help my organization to get better, or even to serve myself sometimes in terms of my own learning and growth. And when you have the heart of a servant, you always want to find out what else can you do to help? What else can you do to serve? And that's led me to apply for jobs, for example, that on paper I might not have been qualified. But I was pretty convinced that if I could be given a shot, I would do the work that was required to get myself to the level that I needed. And I would say that 90% of the time when I have um, taken that kind of action to say, look, I really think I could serve more. There's a job here that would allow me to do that. And again, for me, it's never really been about the money. It hasn't been about the extra £5,000 or £10,000. It was always about what else could I do? What more could I do? So when I've taken the boldness to say, let me try this and see. I know I don't have all the qualifications or experience on paper, but I've got drive, I've got ambition, I'm smart, I'm confident, I know what my transferable skills are. 90% of the time I've been successful, and that's landed me in positions that maybe for where I was in my career, I might not have been there had I gone just the traditional route and waited for things to happen. It might not have happened. So I think that the two things that have worked really well for me, that I would say still characterize rather my career, are having the heart to serve. And when you have a heart to serve, you've got to put your ego to the side. Now, I just want to labor on that a little bit. Putting your ego to the side doesn't mean that you let people game you, or you let them walk over you, or you let people get away with stuff that they shouldn't be doing. It means that you understand what the bigger picture is. And there are some things that you just let go.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You just surrender some things in the interest of a bigger picture. So that's what I mean by putting your ego aside. And the other thing I remember hearing my pastor say is that, Jesus didn't have an ego, right? He
Absolutely.
washed feet, he
Yes.
served, he sat with adulterers and whoremongers and thieves, and and he was willing to do whatever. So if you want to be more like Christ, you can't have that kind of people. You can't be easily offended. And then the other thing is, I said, curiosity, just wanting
You
to
said
find out.
something very
Mm-hmm.
interesting that I wanted to kind of expound on a little bit. You said I would apply for a position, even though on paper it didn't seem like something I can do. Like so many women are fearful. A lot of
Mm-hmm.
women are fearful of that. Well, this job description doesn't match my skill set, or doesn't match, what I think I can do. And I'm assuming that's that curiosity, right? That you lead with, that causes you to apply for those positions, regardless of what the description calls for. Would you say that's correct?
Is curiosity, and I think it's also understanding what you bring to the table. So when you've been in work long enough, you see a lot of things. You see a lot of people who are qualified on paper, but they don't necessarily have the qualities to do the work. They don't have a heart to serve. They're not good with detail. They don't know their data, or they're very blameful in terms of how they lead their teams. It could be any number of characteristics. So I've always, very early in my career, I got into the habit of really delving into a job description. Now, in the last 15 years or so, I have not had to apply for a single job. I've been headhunted for nearly every position. But early in my career, whenever I would get a job description, I would always take it and I would pore over it for days at a time. And I have this process that I use where I would say, okay, if they ask me all the requirements of the job description, if they ask me a question about, notwithstanding that I didn't have all of the qualifications for it, if they ask me a question about this element of the job description, do I have an example that I can share? And that's how I kind of work out whether I'm ready for something or not. So even though it might have asked for a master's degree at a time when I only had a DSS, I knew that I would be able to do that job because the sum of my experience um, was enough to get me into that room. And all I needed was to be able to do a CV that was good enough to get me. But
Wow.
understanding the job description and where you have transferable skills and being able to, if they ask me a question about this right now, can I answer it? Do I have a relevant example that I could share? That's how I prepared myself for jobs, and that probably served me quite well.
Well, I really love that process. It takes a different mindset and a different strategic thinking to really think that through, but it has served you well over the years. So can you discuss a pivotal moment or experience that helped shape your leadership style as well as your approach?
I can probably tell you that I can tell you quite confidently that I've always loved working with people. Now I'm an introvert by preference. I'm an introvert, but I totally adore working with people. And if you ask my family, you ask my team, nobody believes that I'm an introvert because in the way that I work with people, I think I come across pretty much as an
That's
extrovert.
news to me too. I would have never guessed.
Yeah, I get a lot of my energy from my internal space. But um, I've always loved working with people. And so back in, it would have been 2007, I had moved from healthcare to working for a telecoms company. And that was a big shift in itself because what does a nurse actually do in a telecommunications company? About 7 months into my tenure, our boss said, we're going to have a reorg of the team and there'll be some opportunities coming up. If you think you're up for it, let me know. I didn't put my hand up in the meeting, but I sent her an email afterwards and I said, look, whatever you need, I don't know what I can do, but whatever you need, let me know. So she gave me safety engineering and marketing communication. Well, I was a nurse. I had never, in my nursing books, we didn't have safety engineering or marketing communication. And I remember sitting at my desk after I got the gig. And so I went actually from earning about £400 a day, which was a lot back in 2007, to earning about £750 a day. So that in itself was a big thing. So now I'm earning this money and I'm sitting at my desk every day after the team has gone. And I'm like, I'm not even sure I know what, because I'm not a marketer and I know nothing about engineering. But again, I went through that process of asking myself, what do you actually know? You've told yourself all the things that you don't know. What do you actually know? And I knew how to assess situations. So my nursing practice, I knew how to assess. I knew how to put a plan of care in place. I knew how to implement that plan of care by getting people to work together. And I knew how to evaluate. And so the question I posed to myself one evening at my desk at 6:30, I was alone in the office. I said, if marketing communications was a patient and that patient came to you and you didn't know anything about them, what would you do? And so I started working on my transferable skills. Okay, so you know how to lead people, you know how to assess, you know how to do this, you know how to do that. And it was like this light bulb moment that happened where I was like, oh my God, I actually know quite a lot of stuff. And these are skills that I could use in that job. I didn't have to be an expert marketer, and I didn't have to be an expert safety engineer, but I needed to be able to motivate those people to do their job. I needed to learn enough about what they did so that I knew what to expect. I needed to be able to manage projects. I needed to lead them, and I needed to give them the autonomy to do what they trained at university. That completely freed me up in terms of my thinking about what I was capable of and what I wasn't capable of. And so I left that company and ended up working for a tech company. And if you'd have asked me 5 years before that whether I would be a director in a tech company, and let alone a consulting director, I would have been like, are you crazy? Like I have no interest in tech. I know nothing about tech. I'm totally homophobic. So that moment convinced me that I actually had a whole ton of that if I could really position them appropriately, I could literally work anywhere. And really, that's what I've done.
I really love that. And so I'm curious, have you ever had a moment of self-doubt or imposter syndrome as you were going up this leadership, up this career ladder? Did that ever show up for you?
All the time. And actually, I still have doubt. I would not say that I'm the person who is so confident that I don't stop to question, are you doing the right thing? When I was doing that job for British Telecom, I definitely had imposter syndrome. Part of why I was sat at my desk for those 4 weeks at 6 o'clock when everybody had gone was because my thinking was any day now somebody's going to catch me out. Like they're going to realize that I don't know anything about marketing and I know nothing about safety engineering. Well, it must have been clear to them because I'm a nurse by background, right? But in my mind, at least, um, I needed to be as expert as they were, or they were going to catch me out. And so when I had this moment of reflection, where I kind of said, okay, so you don't know that in detail, but what do you actually know, and what can you do well? That was like a big freeing up moment for me, where, wow, you actually know a lot of stuff that you can bring. You don't have to be the expert; they're the expert. You need to get the best out of that too. That's what you need to be able to do. So I definitely have had imposter syndrome on many, many, many occasions. There were many times when I was the only woman in a room. I remember working in a tech company and a guy coming into a meeting, a group of men coming into the meeting and shaking everybody's hand. And one of them winked at me. Didn't shake my hand, but he kind of winked at me. And that made me so angry where I was like, you are not going to get this deal because I was in charge of that team, except he didn't know it. So, if anything, I think I've probably been underrated a few times because nobody expected me.
Mm,
And it's been a pleasure. I kind of like those situations when people underrate you or they wonder, what are you doing in the room? And then you
yeah.
just have an opportunity to blow them away. And then people are like, bloody heck, you're the one. Yeah, I'm the one. But you don't
Because
have to go all out there.
exactly because they always underestimate. Oh, this is a female, and it's a female of color. Oh, she's probably just here. Right. So it's always such a defining moment when it flips. So what are some strategies that you have used to build that confidence? Because it exudes from you so much. What are some strategies that you have used to build that confidence in your abilities?
So I'm a voracious learner. I know people use the term lifelong learning very casually, but I would say that I'm a lifelong. Recently, I appear to have become an expert on AI, um, and a lot of that is my own doing. It happened because I think I worked in tech for about 10 years, but also I'm just really interested in what's happening with AI, particularly as it applies in healthcare. And so I appear to have become some kind of expert, and now I'm speaking at conferences about AI and healthcare. I also build networks of people. I have networks all over the world. So one of the best things about working in the Middle East is that people come from all over the world. And tech company I work for is an American company. I have colleagues all over the world. So there's always somebody I can call to ask for help or ask for advice. Um, I think the other thing is just really honing my craft and knowing my stuff. But it's not enough to be confident. Your confidence has got to be grounded in something. Otherwise, it's just cockiness. And so I really work really hard to know my craft and to learn things that maybe are not my natural skill set. So I remember years ago, I wasn't a very put somebody into detail. If you asked me what I'd like, I'd say startup. And then I remember a boss of mine, a CEO, saying to me, "Oh, so Kathy, you're not a completed finisher, are you?" And he didn't say it as a criticism. He just said it as an observation. And that absolutely stuck with me. And I'm like, okay, if you want to be this kind of boss, you've got to know how to complete and finish. You've got to know what. So I have just, and I try to understand what is the bigger picture, what is the purpose behind what we're doing. If I understand the strategy, it allows me to see beyond what's happening in the moment and to kind of think about what we're actually aiming for as part of the bigger picture. And I'm actually quite bold and creative. If something doesn't work, like, or I make a mistake, I'm the first one to put my hand up and say, oops, guys, sorry, I did that. I got that wrong. Because when I do that, it makes it possible for people around me to feel okay when they make a mistake, to know that I'm not going to judge them harshly and we can move on very quickly. And I try to keep really close to God, right? There are certain things I just don't understand, or things that irritate me in the course of the day. And I have this thing that I do in my office, and I say to the team, guys, you know what? I'm just going to put this one at the foot of the, just going to leave it there. And everybody says it now. Okay, we're going to put it at the foot of the cross. And that helps me, yeah, to let go and just let God sometimes. I don't
Yeah.
need to know everything every day. Some days I just survive, and other days I'm like really high powered, and I'm like, yeah, let's get it.
You know,
So all of those work for me.
so one thing you just mentioned too, for my listening audience, because I know there's a lot of female leaders,
Mm,
mention, I take ownership of things.
mm,
And that's so important because a lot of times some leaders like throw their people under the bus, right? This is your
uh-uh,
lead. So the fact that you stated, I take ownership, and also, I don't criticize failure because in a
mm-mm,
space of agility, when we move in with that agile framework in the
mm,
workplace, failure has to be seen as feedback. What are you going
yeah,
to do differently the next time? Right? It's about taking that postmortem and seeing, okay,
mm,
where did we where was the stopgap? So what happened that now we can revisit that and do it differently the next time, as
yeah,
opposed to dinging someone like you failed at this project, or this project
mm,
didn't go as well. So I really love the fact that you have that forward thinking mindset as a leader to encourage, as a matter of fact, if mistakes, not that you want them to be mediocre in any way, but if there is a
mm,
mistake, if something failed, like what was the lesson learned, and so that we
yeah.
can move forward. So I like that agility framework that you do possess. So my next question for you, this is good. I love this. I love this. What advice do you have for women who aspire to break the barriers and attain senior leadership positions in their respective field?
The first bit of advice I would give to all of us as women is to be clear about what's the real barrier and what's the perceived barrier. Um, Sometimes the barriers are really in our minds. They're not physical barriers to progression and growth. They're the stories we tell ourselves about nobody in the company, no female in the company has ever done this. No black person has ever done this before. I don't have the qualifications to do it. And we as human beings, we have these stories that we tell ourselves, and then we react to the story. And the way that we react to the story, we limit the scale of our ambition. And so the first thing I would say is to determine what's a real barrier and what is the perceived barrier, and then find people who can help you. Right? That doesn't mean going for nepotism or trying to find somebody who can just push you up the ladder, but get a mentor, get a coach, get somebody who understands the business, who can help you, and be honest about what you know and what you don't know, right?
Right.
And be prepared to take the risk.
Mm.
Because the thing about risk is that you will either fail or you will, but you've got to be prepared to take a risk, and you've got to be prepared to put in the work. Like, you've got to know that you fail. You've got to be prepared to put in the work, and you've got to be prepared to put in extra. And then you have to have a value set that is really non-negotiable. And
Mm.
what do I mean by that? So I had a colleague a few months ago who called me to get something from me. He was on the phone, he was shouting and getting quite irate. And so I said to him, look, if you I want to help you with what you need, but you can't speak to me like that. I'm gonna put the phone down, and when you feel that you are able to speak to me in a different way, call me back. Now, that wasn't really about me, because if I met that individual out in the street, he wouldn't dare speak to me like that. But it was about the position. The next woman in that position cannot be spoken to in that way. And
Mm.
therefore, that was a value that I was laying down that said, whoever is in this chair, you cannot speak to them like
Mm.
that. And so you've got to be clear about what your value set. And your skin definitely needs to be a little bit thicker than normal,
Mhm.
right? You can't accept disrespect, but you also cannot be easily offended. And you've got to be prepared to do work that is not right. You've got to bring people along with you. You've got to have a vision for where you want to get to. You can't want to be in a position for being in a position. You've got to understand what is the value you will bring. You, that person, why you? What is the value that you will bring to that? It's not about the promotion. It's about you get me in there, I'm going to give you exponential results, or I'm going to change the tone of your, or I'm going to bring some other value point to you. That's really what. Understand your values and your value. Those are two things that I would say to men to be really clear about. But as I said, the first thing for many of us is to understand whether the barrier that we see is real or whether it's, and who owns that barrier.
I really like that, that perceived barrier, because I think a lot of times it can, in fact, be a perceived barrier.
Yeah,
If especially some imposter syndrome is creeping in there,
yeah,
some self-doubt is creeping in there, then that perceived barrier definitely becomes a hindrance. And I also
absolutely.
yeah, that you shared about setting those boundaries and knowing the value and having
Mm,
those values be respected, right? So
mm.
I really like that. Is there a female leader who has inspired or influenced your own leadership approach?
There are so many people who I would say, yourself included, who I would say have influenced me at different stages in my career and continue to. So I would say you were one of those people who I really looked at, think, wow, she's done her PhD, she's a working mom with 2 kids in a high powered job, managed to get this done. If she can do it, I can do it. There was a senior nurse at the Department of Health when I was coming up in my career called Nola Ishmael. And she was somebody who just took me under her wing. She didn't have to, but she
Right.
really understood legacy. And that's something else I think as leaders we need to think about is legacy. And she took me under her wing. And I remember her telling me, if you don't do anything else, she said, buy yourself every season a good quality coat, a good quality handbag, a good quality suit, and a good quality pair. And on the days when you're lacking confidence, that's what you need to do. And
Wow.
no, there's nothing like that in a book, right? It's just stuff that people tell you grounded in their own experience. I remember looking at this lady called Hanan Ashwari, and this is kind of very timely because of what's happening in the Middle East at the moment. But she was one of the first female leaders in the Palestine Liberation Organization. I had only my mother exposed us to world news very early in our career, in our lives, so I knew a lot about what was happening in the world. But I remember seeing Hanan Ashwari on television and going, wow. And she was just always so well put together, but kind of strong. I remember looking at Carly Farina in Hewlett Packard being the
Mhm.
first CEO of the Fortune 100 company and thinking, wow, so there were so many people. My mom, I would say, was probably one of the first servant leaders I could think about, right? She ran community groups and did all sorts of things. So I would say there were so many women, maybe too many to even mention, who influenced me in my career and continue to do so. I look at people like Rihanna, who, okay, so I can't get makeup to suit my skin tone, so I'll create it myself, right? I mean, all of that is to be admired. And my daughter, I remember her telling me one day about something. She said, if I can't be accountable to myself, then I can't be accountable for anything else. And that has always stuck with me from the time we had that conversation. So I characterize my journey as being one that is very heavily influenced by other female leaders and things that I admire in women, but also having a real sense of who I am and grounded in who I am and really taking the best of what I learn about and from those individuals and trying to curate a career that is service oriented, one that I greatly.
Wow. I like that example. I often hear, I'm not sure who said it, but it's if you can find it, create it. And that's exactly
Yeah.
what we did, right? And that's a lesson for most of us. If you can't find it, then create it. So how do you envision your legacy as a senior leader? And what impact do you hope to leave on future generations of women in the workplace?
So I'm very passionate about healthcare, and I understand my purpose in healthcare. It's not just to run hospitals, really help people everywhere to be healthy. And because I see healthcare as a great leveler. Healthcare for me is the tide that floats all boats. When people are healthy, they can participate in work, they can contribute to the economy, they can give their kids a better life and education, they can put a roof over their head, and they can continue to improve their health and the health of generations to come. So for me, that's really quite purposeful. It's more than what I do in hospital. I really understand how healthcare makes our lives, not just physical lives, but just makes our lives better, and how it supports whole economies. If you didn't believe that, you only had to look at COVID to see that there were some economies that really nearly crashed. So I think for me, it's really about understanding purpose. I think the second is having legacy. A lot of my time is spent coaching and mentoring younger leaders and bringing them up through the ranks. I work in Saudi, and when I leave Saudi, I'm hoping that there will be a Saudi leader in my position. It's always been expat. I hope, and coming from a country that has once been a colony, I get that vibe that says, I grew up here, I was born here, why can't I be in the top position? So my goal is to make that happen for someone and to leave healthcare in Saudi better than when I joined. And then it is also, I think, to understand that as a woman, you bring a certain value to the thing that you do, right? There's a lot of scientific evidence to say that men do think and behave very differently to women. We bring a kind of softness, if you like, to situations that otherwise be quite brutal. And we bring a deep kind of feminine vibe and understanding to things that really help them to calm down when they could be so escalated many. And we have a very nurturing, many of us, not all of us, have a very nurturing persona that helps us to want to get the best out of it. I would say to people to continue to nurture that. And at the same time, be very hard-nosed about your development. Don't wait for anybody to develop nobody will be as interested in your development as you can be. So if you've got to put out a few dollars to go get your master's or to do whatever you do it, you've got to be clear that this is about you. And you have to be most interested. So that self-investment is important. And continue to just be curious. If you ever get to a stage where you feel like you know everything and you've made it, you're over. So continue to be curious, because the world is evolving. And life as we know it is evolving. And we're not just here to survive, we're here to thrive. And so as long as you can grow alongside life, you always have a chance to do the things that you do.
Awesome. If we're not growing, we're dying, right? So that's for
Yeah.
sure. And female leaders do in fact bring that nurturing side, because we are innate, that's an innate ability. We are created as nurturers. So we do bring that softer side, as you say, still leading from a strong place, but we do bring that softer side, showing up as that more emotionally intelligent that a lot of the millennials gravitate to, because that's what they're looking for. They want to see emotionally intelligent leaders. They want to make sure that there's some psychological safety is being provided for them.
Yeah.
They want to know, are you an empathetic leader? Do you see me? Do you hear me? Am I appreciated? I want a seat at the table. And so we want to be able to provide that for this future generation that we have, and not stop seeing them as entitled. They're here to stay and they're not going anywhere. So we just have to help groom them and mold them to be the leaders that, would lead from a strong place going forward. And so my last question for you, what would you say to your younger self?
I would say to my younger self, your best is yet to come. Don't worry about it and don't stress it. Your best of everything is still to come. I spent a lot of my younger years worrying about all sorts of things that I couldn't see. I worried about being too dark. I worried about not being pretty enough. I worried about not being smart enough. I worried about, was I ever going to get married? Was I ever going to have a career? Was I going to be successful? First of all, God's got you. If you have any kind of faith, you've got to know that God's got you. But I would say to my younger self, just enjoy your youth, right? Your best is yet to come. And had I known that, you know, we always say, what would we say to our younger self? But maybe if we said some of the things we could to a younger self with hindsight, we might not be who we are today, right? There's something that drives us about those conversations that we don't have with our younger self. That
Mm,
when we get to be experienced, we realize that that was the making of it, right? So as much as I would say your best is yet to come, that's come with hindsight. It hasn't come with, and even if somebody had told me that at 16, I might not have believed it.
right.
So
Yeah.
each of us has our
Journey.
journey.
It's,
That would be a good message.
yes, it's a journey. I love it. So I am so excited to have had you on the show. You just are such a wealth of information and knowledge. So I want to thank everyone for watching or listening. So please share, like, comment, and remember to be stronger than your excuses and always, always empower you. This is your girl, Dr. K. Until next time, be great.